So this will be part one of three parts. Part one of three parts. And my sharing, of course, will be based, of course, on what I've also learned from Professor David Cole. And so here we'll look into what are the itineraries. So in the first part here, today's part one, we will look at it from the outer layer. We'll look at the multi-generational global outlook. And from there on, the second part will then zoom into the country, then sectorial movement by the next part. And the last part will then look into the effect on the personal outlook that we then have. So this will be the three parts for ourselves. So if you're good and ready, we'll proceed now. And anytime, please ask questions, if you can. Okay, so today being part one of three will be the multi-generational and global outlook. So the theme for today is just to look at it from the big picture and the long count, as it is. Now, as we are entering into the year of the water rabbit, and also to some of you, period 9 coming in 2 years' time, we do see that if you follow certain of the literature in the past, for example, here we look into the book of Huangqi Jingxi, whereby Shaoyong, that comes from the Northern Sung dynasty at the time, using, of course, the I Ching, using the He-Tu map, and Helu will also look into outlining the long count cycle. Therefore, here in this one cycle, we of course know that every 12 months belongs to a year, and every 30 years belongs to one life. That's all, there's one life. And every one life and every 12 life belongs to one cycle. 30 cycles belong to a meeting. 12 meetings belong to one yuan. And one yuan is considered to be 1,296 years. And so a complete cycle would then be about 0.559. Something very similar to what we call the galactic year. So as the Earth spins around the Sun, of course, spins around along the Milky Way in the solar system into the galaxy. Therefore, in the very long count, on the meeting which lasts between this period, we are now at the period which is the R7, which is the horse, and the hexagram, that is the cauldron, will be what known as the master hexagram, that will persist. And therefore here, based on this one particular look, we look into what we consider to be the cycle or the very long count cycle. Now, for those of us who look into economics, who look into the study of business, we all know that in studies of humanities, we also rely on cycle. And the cycle, they are what we call the long count cycle to the short count cycle as well. So cycles may range from 40 to 60 years. And of course, we do have the short count cycle. And very popular in economics would be the quadratic cycle, which is then closely linked to what I call the technology life cycle as well. And therefore, of course, the study of I Ching is the study of changes, which of course look into the study of cycle, which is very short cycles within a longer cycles within a much longer multi-generational cycle. So let's say, for example, here, right now, in many investments, we do have the issue of climate change, ESG, environmental, social, and governance. And part of these global warming movements, which drives many economies and businesses. We have United Nations, we have World Economic Forums, we have multiple agencies looking into the issue of climate change. And of course, here, the concern of today is the level of carbon monoxide. But very interestingly, of course, is that the level of temperature, and of course, the temperature carbon monoxide looks into a cycle. There is a cycle. So there are periods of cycle where the Earth warms as well as it cools down. So therefore, here over the last 50, 60 years, we of course seen the rising temperature that we actually can observe as well. And therefore, here scientists are concerned about global warming, concerned about climate change, concerned about the temperature increasing due to carbon deposits. And therefore, here as you look into the long count cycle, we consider the cycle goes into a period of 800,000 years, as years. And so we start off with a very, very long count, a very long cycle today, looking into the economic cycles that we have. And so the cycle that we would like to link to I Ching for today will be things like cause and effect, to which quadratic cycle is about that. And of course, cause and effect looks into why the economic cycle goes into contraction, goes into recession, goes into recovery, and then to economic boom. Into this part, of course, we consider human events, inequity, opportunity, social freedom that we can see, ranging from autocratic governance to liberal governance along the way. And when we look into very long count of the 60-year cycle, we then have, of course, the belief into that every cycle has to do with technological changes that we have. We also look into the lifestyles, the demographic theory, land, which of course has been something that drives the economy for a very long time. And now the interest rates are rising. You can also see how property prices may be suppressed due to that as well. And of course, in the today's global concern will be the US debt, which has risen to $31 trillion. So debt deflation has always part of the economic cycle, has always been the attributing factor to explain the boom and bust cycles for economic. So therefore, we're going to link to the all these theories that we have as well. All right. So over the many years, as we look into human evolution, we do see that every economic cycle that society experiences is a transformation cycle. And that's what I Ching would help to us to look into the transformation from one team to another. And here, of course, at this juncture in the era, we're looking into what we call the transformation of information, from material to energy to information change, that we can see as well. All right. So move on into the part. And here comes from the works of Professor Devico in one of his recent lectures. He introduced, of course, a very popular divination method that is in China, in Taiwan as well, which is the 推背序. That means we look into the pushback divination. Now, the pushback divination again links to multi-generational hexagram, and the hexagram that is written is for a very long count. Therefore, the hexagram looks into dynasty. And dynasty, of course, can last for hundreds of years. And so let's say, for example, in the pushback divination, the book, which is very ancient, due back to even before the Tang Dynasty, looks into the writing of the hexagram and the layout of the hexagram during the second image. The book, of course, is very simple and short in the article. Every multi-generational hexagram has only one page, and that one page has somewhat a picture, somewhat has a picture. And then based on the picture, of course, together with the words, comes to the translation. And the translation that we have, the translation that we look at into this part. So when we consider what we call the translation here pertains to how one can interpret what are the so-called the drawings that we have. For example, here the picture shows 21 plums. 21. Now in Chinese, of course, plum, which is Li, which is also very close to the name Li, has the adopted Li for the emperor for Tang, which of course every emperor in China that takes power, in order to have legitimacy, in order to claim that they have the mandate from heaven, tends to somehow find lineage, that they somehow will be a descendant, that their ancestors are somewhat either divine or related to the royal family. And that gives them the legitimacy to hold power. And therefore here, the picture of the plum would indicate and lean towards the name that the Tang Dynasty emperors will adopt. And very interestingly, of course, they have 21 plums, which of course later we learned that there were 21 emperors in the Tang dynasty. Some say 22, but eventually through the debate, historians would tend to say that there are 21 historians. And a very careful investigation into the picture outlined that there are 21 plums, but only 20 with stalks. Only 20 with stalks. One of the plums actually has without stalks. And so this will be the picture for divining the Tang dynasty. So one would take great efforts to actually interpret and to read between the lines to really understand what it actually entails. And of course, now that it has come to pass, uh, it may indicate that there are 21 emperors and all of them were males except for one female. So therefore, that's why one of them is without the stock. And Wu Zetian, Empress Dowager, that also, of course, assumed power, became one of the empress or the only empress in the Tang dynasty. Okay, so anyway, this will be how the pushback divination has read over the past year. So moving forward, so every page that comes along has this. And so for today, as we look into today, we are now so at this era in the next part will then be the image that is on page 45 of this pushback definition. So over the years, the Tang dynasty, the Jing dynasty, you have your Ming, for all the various dynasties in the past, we now come into this particular era. So the era that we're in, according to this book, is here. The hexagram that we have is the hexagram of bliss. This is the bliss hexagram, which is the coming of the so-called generation. And here, the image, once again, just by merely looking at this image and to deeply contemplate and reflect on what this image would mean, is where we then foretell and to expect what are the emerging trends that comes in mind. Yeah, as it is. Alright, so this image is about two persons, two armed persons. So two of them carry spears. So two of them are essentially armed with a spear, threatening in an attacking pose. Therefore, they are in a holding spear position towards a bright hot sun. So therefore, it appears that they are hostile, that they are attacking towards the hot sun. So the phenomena that is written, of course, would indicate that there are foreigner guests from the west. Stop them when they reach the east. Wood, fire, metal, water. Take a guess which element is missing from these five. Therefore, that's where the cryptic message may lie. Wash the great humiliation. Therefore, here the image would be in this particular reading. So it says a hot period, as in a fire period. The period is fire. 9. Open a new page. Everyone equal. The golden bird hidden in white ocean. From now on, dare not claim superior. Okay, the English may be transliterated. Military power is totally diffused as their luck ran ended. So therefore, that is the poem that one can get. And so here, it is now for historians, for metaphysicians to actually interpret what this meaning lies, what this meaning and how this imagery will come in 2 years from now. Okay, so one interpretation that Professor David Coe adopted is that the golden bird may represent, or the golden bird is an eagle. Now, which country adopts eagle as their symbol? That may be something that gives you a clue. All right, you got it right, Robin. And hidden in the white ocean. White ocean. So the white ocean, what does it mean? So therefore, that's where, once again, all this has been written long time ago, before the Tang dynasty. And therefore, during the seminar, Professor David Cole was running through dynasty by dynasty. During what is the picture, the image for the Tang dynasty? What is the image for the Ming dynasty, and so on. But of course, I don't have time for today to run through all the images over the multi generations. We just look into what is coming. So this is the picture of what is coming. And therefore here we find relation. Eagle hidden in the white ocean. What does hidden may indicate? Professor David Cole may mean that hidden indicates that not attacking, not not confronting, not invading, not invasion, but hidden, like a submarine, like a submarine submerged in an ocean, the Pacific Ocean. From now on, in the next period, dare not claim superior, dare not claim. So indicating that this interpretation may open to the fact that the decline of the eagle has a superior military power. A military power that's totally diffused, has the luck, rank, and so therefore that it will be somewhere along the line, as it is. And the interpretation is that out of the five elements, the one that's missing would be Earth, as in Chongguo or China, wash away the great humiliation. So indicating possibly interpreting a country that has suffered 100 year of humiliation, or the last generation of humiliation, wash away, something along that. Alright, so anyway, this would be the image and the hexagram that is what I call the master hexagram. So this hexagram lasts for this persisting for this particular generation, as it is. Okay, so now as we look into the long cycle, we are talking about the long hexagram. We now come on into the shorter hexagram, the 20-yearly periodic cycles. And so I'm sure you would be very aware that there are so many out there now talking about the coming period 9. The coming period 9. To which of course we have 2 more years to go, or personally next year will be the last year for the period 8 before we transit to period 9. Now, later, of course, as I go through some of the maps and so on, there'll be lots of numbers coming up, and then, of course, we'll interpret the numbers, number 1 as they are, then number 2 in the combination. So when all these numbers combine together, host and guest, arriving qua number against the host, then, of course, the host against the master hexagram. So therefore, we have a master hexagram. We also have to look into the 20-year hexagram, and now we look into the yearly hexagram. So to cut the long story short, to make it stereotypical, before we go in depth into the combinations and into looking into more complex meaning, at a very superficial ballpark level, every time you see the number 1, 6, and 8, it's good. 1, 6, 8 is generally good. It's prosperous, you make money, you have good. Therefore, generally. But again, of course, bear in mind that we are looking into a 20-year. So definitely we're not looking into a continuous, unbroken 20 years of wealth and prosperity. That's not it. I'm sure you will be aware that share market is always moving in a wave formation. It's not linear. So therefore, there shouldn't be any argument into what do we mean by that 20 years ago. Alright, so 168 is generally good. 7 is about change. It's about introducing technology. And so one can say that period 7 has introduced tremendous amount of technology. I mean, the internet, we can see that the 1984 was the beginning of the internet that comes in. Industrial revolution that invented electricity was here. Therefore, electricity came at the period 1. As then we look into Thomas Edison introducing electricity during this period, heralding the technological change. So essentially, number 1, every cycle has technological changes in them. That is part of the cycle that we introduce about what are the driving technology that push each and every change in our economic cycle that we are looking for. So what is the particular yeah. Okay. So based on the her two, based on the her two original. Sorry, testing. So can you hear me? Is everything good? Okay. Right. So okay, thank you. I think suddenly I have a message that says my Zoom was cut out. Okay. Right now. So remember 168, good. 168, you see the number, good. 7 is just about something new or something changed. 3 and 8, also good. It's about growth, it's about education. 4 and 9 is violence. 4 and 9 is violence. And therefore, as we look into the period number 9, 9 is metal, and this metal, of course, is yang metal, indicating violence, indicating a period of war, a period. So essentially, 4 and 9 are war. The last time we had period 4, of course, was a period of World War II. We have World War II going on there. Therefore, that was one part. So this is where this is may indicate when we tie in together with the beginning of the cycle, mapping together with this area. Professor Livico came up with one interpretation that in the year 2024, because China Communist Party just had their major so-called uh, changing of guards of power. Xi Jinping is still the premier number one, and within the next 5 years, when the changing of guards also engage or appoint people who are more pro-war or hawkish in the experience, and it is of course touted that they would want to they observe that they want to observe political analysts of course observe that China has been so-called encouraged by America's reaction in Afghanistan and also in Ukraine, would indicate that together with the Communist Party of China's strategic interest in taking over Taiwan, together with the fact that the period is coming in. I was also informed that after now, what is the year after Water Rabbit? What is the year after next year? What is the year after? What is it? What is it? What is the year? What year is it when we come into the Water Rabbit? That would be your Wood Dragon, Jiachen. And Jiachen is also a war year, the year of war has, the year where it's a warring year in the ring. And so this may lead on to the Professor David Koh getting the translation that China may invade Taiwan in 2024. It may they don't be possible. And will America react? Will America react? There is a expectation that they will not, that they will not, because well they promised Ukraine that they will act. Well, they also promised Afghanistan that they will stay there with them. So therefore, one can begin to see the changing of the military power. So anyway, that would be just part of looking into what are the expectation for that period. Okay, number 2 is death. Number 2 is about death. Number 5 is about sickness and disease. So therefore, that will be the numbers and the meaning that comes from it here as well. All right, so therefore, we'll keep these numbers in mind as we go along. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just keep these numbers here and I'll cut it down to my whiteboard as I normally would do. Yeah. Yeah, so therefore here, as I come to my whiteboard, let me just put it here for the time being. All right, so now we'll move on to looking. So as we know, we have one more year before period 8, before we transit to period 9. So again, as there is a transition, there will be there will be changes that we could have seen as well. Now, one of the changes that I often bring about, I mean, let's say, for example, I would also like to show interest rate, interest rate. Now, so as we look into the changes, let me just bring along one particular area. Let me go to FRED, which is the Federal Reserve Economic Research. Let me take a look into the Treasury bill yield on a monthly basis. Right. And so next to this, of course, is then that what happens right into the end of in the 80s is a period in which, of course, the, this policy has resulted in very high interest rates. So the interest rate has gone up to very, very high, to 15%. 15%. For those of us who may remember, the housing loan in Malaysia was about 12% way back in the 80s. Then, of course, comes to another period where we have your 83, where the world began to listen to Milton Friedman. So Milton Friedman, of course, challenged Keynesian by saying that, look, uh, yes, it's true that fiscal policy, expansionary policy is a catalyst for growth, but money supply is is also a kind of a stimulus for the economic growth, where if you print more money, lower interest rates, you can also so-called boost the economy. Therefore, has the world moved on to the lower cycle, starting from the mid 80s right down to 2043, we can see that for the last three part, interest rate has been falling. Interest rate has been, and therefore the interest rate environment has moved quite uh, sharply between the middle and to the lower period. And therefore now as we are moving towards to the tail end of the third period, we might find that this environment may continue to persist. So indicating that this particular year that we have, showing that the interest rate has gone up thanks to the global shortage supply and also the pandemic. One may argue that this particular rate may not persist. It may not have persisted. So as we move on into the period for the fire period that we have. All right. So anyway, that was just to look into how we tie up the economic cycle, the cycle of interest rates from the long count, and how it matches to some of this changing cycle in the period, all the same as well. And now let's take a look into Professor David Cole's 22-23 forecast as we come into the year 2023. And then, of course, the QA number, the center QA number for 2023 is period 4. And for this period, Professor David Cole makes the prediction that the confrontation is about money matters. There's a recession, bubble bursting that might take more than 3 years to recover. As we're entering into the hot cycle, climate change, food shortage supply, that's also the one that is mentioned. And sector very much affected will be the East and the Northeast. Sectors that are doing well will be the South and the Southwest, based following on this particular QA number that we have seen as well. Okay, once again, in this QA number that we can explore, we'll take a look into, of course, the relationship with the QA number to the global outlook. Now, this particular graph here, for those of you those who know Flying Star very well, Professor Divico or Minks tends to invert the QA number to make this north and south, to make this east and west. Therefore, the QA number is inverted from the normal chart that we normally see. And Professor Divico focused on the Himalaya to be the starting point to where the tallest mountain in the world would be the source of the emitting energy to the planet. Therefore, the countries or the region that falls between this region would then be considered to be from the compass point of the Himalayan point. And very quickly, again, as I mentioned, good sectors would be 168, 168 generally, 168. Surprisingly, we can see how it's mentioned. Bad sectors would tend to be 2, so 5 would be it. So therefore, Europe 5, which is bad, and East, which of course to the east of Himalaya, coming into the part, will be then quite generally affected as well. And therefore, by doing that, we may see that number 2 may represent sickness, and the sickness in the east would be China, China to the part as well, yeah? As it is. Sorry? Yes, it's confusing. I know it's confusing. I know because yeah, it is confusing because I think as I tried to uh, mention that the that it is inverted lah. It is inverted. One have to look at it from an inverted point of view. The like for example, we what I call it? Normally our graph, normally the graph that we are more familiar with are graphs that what I call it? Graph that is that we put south facing up. We normally put south facing up into the part. Yeah. Okay, maybe let me just get it up right here. Sorry, your position are not okay. Let me just get something correct. Okay. Oh no, this is for the year 2023. Yeah, in the year 2023, this would be the qua. Okay, for the water rabbit. For the water rabbit. Okay, so this would be the qua for the water rabbit. So this is the qua, right? And here, of course, into this part, this is so I'm not talking about the original. I'm not talking about the original flying star. I'm not talking about original, Robin. We're talking about the 2023, 2023, not the original, 2023. But then, of course, south is normally seen, but now we put south here, south. We put north there. So the thing have to be inverted. Okay, not? I hope that makes sense, yeah? Okay. Reason why Professor David Cole inverted the usual flying star chart, usually. Yeah, usually they try to invert the flying star chart is because we want to put it into the map, put it into the geographical map, the world map that we are very familiar with. And then, of course, we put Himalaya as a focal point. So therefore, these numbers are inverted. They are inverted. Okay, so anyway, Malaysia, Southeast Asia is 3. Southeast Asia is 3, which is generally favorable. It represents growth, new element. Therefore, that's quite positive. Okay. What may not be positive, of course, would then be East, like India and so on. Yes, quarrelsome also lah. uh, into a certain degree lah. Generally lah, but 168 lah. So that's why we come back to that. We come back to what I call it 168. Would then be generally the one with the wealth, prosperity, and benefit of luck that comes into it as well. Therefore, war, fight, violence is in 4 and 9. 4 and 9. Okay, but 4 of course is center, 9 is north. Therefore, north of Himalaya to a certain degree up into the, which is basically Russia. Therefore, we have Russia that is having that war, which may also indicate that the conflict with Ukraine will likely continue until the year of the water rabbit. And the one that suffers mostly in terms of sickness and death would likely be uh, Europe, which suffered from it to the benefit of the West. America is selling oil to Europe at a very good rate that you can see here as well. Rise of Africa, maybe we'll see Africa, because Africa has minerals and also, of course, have commodities. Commodity prices may increase with the shortage of food that may come from it as well. Generally, one can also look into this. And of course, we have seventh, which also would be a period of conflict as well. Together with this, so therefore, that's the overall global outlook that we could have as well. Yeah, that's it. Into the general store. Okay, so overall, into one part, the year for the water rabbit would tend to be generally positive, with, of course, an impending change in period 9 comes to the year before that. So maybe next year will be somewhat like the calm before a big storm that comes into it. Okay, now here, coming into the Qua number, if you don't mind, this chart here is to a revision to the previous, the north and south is moving. So as we look into Southeast Asia would that be in this quadrant? So as you look into Southeast Asia, this would be the quadrant for Southeast Asia with the first qua number 3 that comes in. And from this qua number 3 and looking into Yi Ching and looking into a time cycle, usually there are now 12 boxes here representing the 12 months. And these 12 months do not start from the Chinese lunar calendar. It starts from winter solstice, or at least Yi Ching normally premise on that. The more ancient New Year, which happens to fall onto the longest night, the darkest night, winter solstice. So in a way, and winter solstice will just be 1 week before that. So normally we can just ballpark this to January, February, March, and then to April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. So not really ballpark exactly to the Western calendar, but someone along the line in this one. And so very quick ballpark. Number one, this is not Malaysia yet. This is Southeast Asia. But of course, Malaysia being a member of the countries will then face something along the line of the energy that comes. So we're going to decompose this into the months that we have. Okay, in a very, very quick manner. Therefore, again, we highlight the good ones, which is your 1, 6, and 8. So the 1, 6, and 8 would indicate the good months. This may be for prospective investors, share market, bond market, those who would like to look into investment prospects may find that these are the better months for trade, good news, prosperity, and whatnot. And we may find that the negative months would then be March and June into coming in as well. One may also take it that if you, once again, look into the general part, whereby 4 and 9 may mean violence. But when you talk about violence coming into the share market perspective, for share market perspective, they may represent volatility. So it represents a more volatile trading area conflict. For those of you who followed, right, for those of you who followed the Bitcoin, recently, of course, there was a bit of a war between two big personalities, between Binance, and also TFX, Bitcoin, and, and of course here resulted in a sudden bankruptcy in one of them. So the fight ended with one losing and declared bankrupt, and the cryptocurrency market has crashed down to below 16,000 per coin. And now police are investigating because there's a lot of issues as well. Therefore, those things tends to happen in 4 and 9. Therefore, 4 and 9 would then be outlined, perceived to be a volatile trading area, which has to do with conflicts, which have to do with certain partners. Okay. Now, Connie, you did mention about quarrelsome, but here, uh, somehow we refer to the original Hertu formation. We refer to the original Hertu formation when we talk about fire and earth. So 2 is not your Kun Kwa mother. 9 is not your Li Kwa fire. Okay, 7 is not your Tui Kwa. So not your Chen and not your Qian Kwa, Kan Kwa. So somewhat the original Hertu formation will be read when one looks into the numbers here. So sometimes when we reduce names to numbers, then of course numbers can somehow be interpreted and mean many things. So that's where I keep this part here to record that Professor David Cole would say when 3 and 8 means wood or growth, it actually means this 3 and wood, not your 3 chen kwa, which of course 3 is chen, but not 8, 8 is ken kwa, yeah, that comes into it. All right, so anyway, again, this is a very superficial big picture because we haven't zoomed in yet to the combination. So I'm sure you'll be aware that all these numbers combine with one another, they clash with one another, that gives deeper meaning into the interpretation that comes forward. So broadly speaking, for the case of Southeast Asia, that would be what we are primarily looking for, capturing the bigger months before we move on into the smaller months. It comes. So therefore, that's the one part on what are the what is the outlook on the sharing that one can consider. Okay, move along, and of course we'll look into the changes that we have. Then one change that we talk about, of course, here from the World Economic Forum, looking into what are the identification for key global risks in the next 10 years. One outline that the three key risk World Economic Forum has outlined will have to do with environment, climate action failure like a case of flood in Malaysia, extreme weather that we are beginning to observe, and of course loss of biodiversity in terms of the loss of flora and fauna species and so on that comes into it. And other issues that are coming to mind are also on the rise, like debt crisis and geoeconomic confrontation. Geoeconomic confrontation may be war because of resources. Now, war is always, of course, of resources, but now these resources may not be the oil. Yeah, it has always been oil, but it may even be things like fresh water. Fresh water. Therefore, countries going to war because of fresh water, as water may be a scarce resource in the coming cycle as well. Therefore, these are things that the global agencies are monitoring and considering what are the kind of potential risks that comes into mind. So we are looking more into environmental and social pressures from this arena as well. All right, so as we tie in, because here, what I like to do, of course, is to put in more uh, combination between what is actually happening around the world, what are the world leaders and agencies looking at, and tying together with how we can then link and try to explain the cycle. Because here, I'm not just happy to sit down here and say, oh, these are bad months, these are good months, and then that's it. Or when you say good, what are the likely good events? Because good and bad are just luck, but luck comes together with action. So if there are no actions to be taken, luck is just the wind that blows, the water that flows, and nothing will bring results. Okay, so anyway, as we come into the last slide for today, this is just the upcoming preparation for period number 9. So period number 9 that begins 2 years from now, it begins with an appropriate warrior, which is the Jiachen, the water, the wood tiger that comes in. Period 9 is metal, warring period. Therefore, the period 9 would indicates that the pegging order would change. And this period, good news for us, we are southeast, northwest, and southwest would be favorable. So these are general three sectors that will be favorable in period number 9. The unfavorable ones will then be the worst sector will be the west, not next year, but period 9. So let's talk about period 9. North Russia will begin to decline. So looks like the war with Ukraine and NATO, and of course, may also find itself weakening the next 20 years. Russia may begin to face so-called decline together with the West that comes in. So you can expect America to suffer badly together with the Middle East. So there will be some resource crisis all related. The one that will be slower in improvement will be Northeast, South, and East. Therefore, this will be looking into the period 9 and what period 9 may bring for us. So this is one part of today's sharing. So today's sharing, we look at it from number 1, the multi-generational level, and then we come down to looking at it from the 20-year cycle that is impendingly coming, and also looking into the year cycle that we have. All right. And so as we come into this part, we also need to see that we will keep this in mind as we come into Malaysia and what are the months that investors may look at it more favorably when they would like to invest or would like to consider what are the better months to invest ahead as well. Right, more of this to come as we move on to 2, which is then 2 weeks from now as we come into Malaysia. Therefore, we will then focus on the country, Malaysia, and also zoom in into. So for Malaysia, of course, just give you a bit of that clue, even though I think I didn't prepare the materials for you, but just to give you a clue, but I think you don't have this. The hexagram for Malaysia as you come into 2023 is hexagram 37, which is family. Family. So this is the flow cycle for Malaysia. The binary code is 43. So in long story short, the lower qua is yang. When you see a trigram with only one yin line, this is a female trigram, and this female trigram is fire. It's the second daughter. And when you see the trigram above, which is also one yin line, this is also a female. It's also a female trigram, which is the eldest daughter, Xinhua. which is the wood or wind, sometimes as it is. And therefore, with liquor, fire at the bottom, and wood at the top, very big picture, both fire and wood are usually favorable.